The Saints get an incredible 5 takeaways against the Chicago Bears to run their win streak to 2 and reclaim first place in the NFC South. We'll break down what happened with Ross Jackson from the Locked On Saints podcast. LSU's defense could not rise to the occasion against Alabama, and the Tigers' title hopes are over. A full report looking forward from Tuscaloosa. The prep playoff brackets are out with some surprises and a whole lot more tonight on 4th Down on 4. Yeah, it was not pretty, but the Saints are finding ways to win Sunday with an opportunistic defense that got turnover after turnover. I'm Doug Mouton. Welcome to 4th Down on 4. Bottom line, the Saints took care of business against one of the NFL's weakest teams. Ricardo LeCompte kicks us off from the Caesars Superdome.
If the Saints picked a defensive MVP for the team's 5th win of the season, hands down, the hypothetical honor would go to cornerback Paulson Adebo. 2 picks and a forced fumble and recovery.
What does this rank for you for your personal performances all time?
Probably one of the best. I mean, 2 picks and a forced fumble. I think it's probably my best. But again, there's some plays that I made mistakes on and whatnot that maybe hadn't been highlighted. So, give and take.
Adebo contributed to 3 of the Saints' 5 takeaways in the game. New Orleans tied for the NFL lead in that category and in turnover margin at +8 after the Sunday afternoon slate of games.
I think it was really just our guys, making plays. I think the takeaways were outstanding. There wasn't a lot good that I saw defensively.
And that's because Dennis Allen's defense couldn't stop Tyson Bagent in the first half. The Bears' undrafted rookie quarterback made his 3rd career start and tossed 2 red zone touchdowns to tight end Cole Kmet. Bagent also stressed the Saints' defense, rushing for 60 yards in the first 30 minutes.
He did a good job of, finding his lanes to escape the pocket. When his reads wasn't there, he did, like I said, he did a great job getting to his feet. He did a great job on the boots and things like that. So, we just got to find a way to keep him in the pocket.
They did, limiting him to just 10 yards rushing in the second half. And after completing over 77% of his passes in the first half, the Saints held Bagent to a 47% completion percentage over the final 2 quarters. Derek Carr in the offense kept up with Bagent and the Bears in the first half. Carr threw 2 touchdown passes, one to his leading receiver in the game, Chris Olave, and the other to Taysom Hill. The Saints' Swiss Army knife caught 4 passes, led the team with 11 carries for 52 yards, and completed 1 pass, which proved to be an important touchdown early in the 4th quarter. And on that go-ahead score, the Saints went into their jumbo package on the 3-yard line. Defensive tackle Colin Saunders was lined up in the backfield, and he ran a route out of the backfield and into the end zone. 2 Bears defenders went to cover him. And in the progression of the play, Juwan Johnson was left wide open at the far end of the end zone.
Binkertron, that's what my new nickname will be. Because, I feel like Calvin out there, man. I looked up, had to turn around and count each one of them to let them know, y'all got 3 people on the D lineman right now.
We thought Big was going to be our secret weapon, but, our secret weapon isn't a secret anymore. We thought he was going to be open. I just tried to find my way to get open and take some vision.
That's what the Saints did right on offense. New Orleans sputtered offensively after halftime, and in the end scored just 10 total points off the 5 turnovers forced.
That's unacceptable. If you have +5 in the turnover margin, you're probably thinking you're winning by 3 or 4 scores. So we left a lot out there. That should be a pretty comfortable game at the end. But, importantly, we won the game. They
got the win and moved into first place in the NFC South, with a chance to extend a win streak next Sunday before heading into the bye week. Reporting at the Caesars Superdome, Ricardo LeCompte, 4th Down on 4.
Yeah, good stuff, Ricardo. And the Saints are now on top in the NFC South. If the season ended today, the Saints would be 4 seeds in the playoffs and host a wild card game. Now, after the game, we got some analysis from Ross Jackson of the Locked On Saints podcast.
All right, Ross, I feel like we have to start with Paulson Adebo. Rarely does a cornerback sort of dominate a game, but in the second half, Paulson Adebo absolutely did, didn't he?
Yeah, one of the things that I loved about Paulson Adebo's performance is that he comes out and he capitalizes off of a big week against the Indianapolis Colts where he had a touchdown-saving interception potentially. Comes back, has these 2 big interceptions plus the punch-out. And so when you have a game like that, one of the things that you want to look at is, do you have a game like that that contributes to a win, or do you have a game like that that kind of falls behind a loss? And his performance immediately contributed to the New Orleans Saints win. That's a dream for a defensive back in the NFL.
No question about it. But look, one of the problems for the defense that keeps rearing its head is the opposing quarterback's ability to get loose. Tyson Bagent, athletic guy, was able to get loose on the Saints, put up a bunch of big runs. Mobile quarterbacks are killing the Saints right now, aren't they?
Yeah, and the tricky part about this now is that when we had this conversation 2 years ago, we're talking about 5 or 6, maybe 10 guys. Now we're talking about the majority of the NFL has that quarterback that can at least extend a play or go out and pick up the yardage when you vacate the middle of the field, which is a big issue for New Orleans. So they really have to get this figured out in terms of maintaining their discipline. Dennis Allen talked about you can't just be a bunch of defensive linemen trying to win your one-on-ones. There has to be some structure and plan to the way that you rush the passer. We haven't seen that from New Orleans yet, and eventually it's going to be very tough to overcome once they go up against the right talent.
And then looking at the offensive side, look, a lot of things they didn't do well, but clean was the one thing they did very well. No turnovers, no sacks, 1 penalty the whole game. It was a really clean game on offense. That's the positive, right?
That's what you're looking for from this team, for sure. It puts them in the opportunity and puts them in position to have the opportunity, rather, to be able to do what it is that they do in situational football. We watched them on one drive score after a turnover. That score came in the red zone on a 3rd down. They were 50% in the red zone. They were 50% on 3rd down. They were 75% in the red zone. What that shows you is that the situational football things that they struggled with early, this offense is starting to find ways to curve without stepping on their own toes.
And bottom line, the Saints took care of business. Look, that's the one thing you had to do. Last week in Indianapolis against a backup quarterback, it was clunky at times. They took care of business. This week against a backup quarterback and not a very good team, clunky at times, you took care of business. That's the bottom line, right?
That's exactly what you're looking for, and that's exactly the way to look at it. I mean, the other thing to pay attention to here is that Michael Thomas didn't have a single catch in this game. He was only targeted twice, one of which won't show up on a stat sheet because it was a penalty. This is the first time since the New Orleans Saints drafted Michael Thomas that he went into a game active and didn't have at least 2 catches in the game. If we were having this conversation 2 years ago, that's a loss because Michael Thomas was the only option that they had 2-3 years ago. In this game, they were able to find other ways to distribute the ball, move the ball, pick up those 3rd downs, even when they couldn't necessarily lean on Michael Thomas. That's one of the most beautiful things about this New Orleans Saints offense. They have the number of weapons and they have the level of play outside of one individual talent to be able to make up when that talent gets taken out of a game.
Yeah, now thanks to Ross. Now the Saints will visit Minnesota next Sunday, and then they have their bye. Now up next, LSU had a chance to get back into the national championship hunt, but they could not get a stop in Alabama. Seth Lewis reports from Tuscaloosa. That's ahead on 4th Down on 4. Against 3 high-quality opponents this season, that's Florida State, Ole Miss, and Alabama, LSU simply couldn't get enough stops. That's the story of the 2023 Tigers, a great offensive team that got no help from its defense. Seth Lewis reports from Tuscaloosa.
It was a thrilling shootout between LSU and Alabama to determine who would take the Wild West of the SEC. But the Tigers learned quickly T-Town wasn't big enough for the both of them.
You can't play good. We played good tonight. Good's not good enough. You have to play elite when you go on the road and play a top 10 team.
Alabama became the latest team to feast on this LSU defense. The Tide scoring 42 points on over 500 yards of offense. And on the ground, Bama finished with nearly 300 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns.
I mean, we just didn't come out there with the right mentality. I just think we let some things slip away from us in the second half. It just wasn't good enough.
Jalen Milroe was the main chef in the Crimson Kitchen, as his 4 rushing TDs was a Bama record for quarterbacks. But his best dish was 3rd downs. The sophomore's speed and elusiveness, allowing him to gain 164 yards on 3rd down while keeping the Tigers' defense confused and on the field.
I think it's the challenge that we knew, his ability to run. You know, we talked all week about a unit pass rush. You know, he's elusive. You know, for the most part, I think the big runs were probably the things that hurt us the most tonight.
This has become a theme for LSU's defense. In their 3 losses, the Tigers are giving up an average of 47 points and 570 yards per game, while allowing 66% on third downs.
All 11 just not doing the job to their ability. It's been a problem for us all year getting off the field on third down. Obviously, we need to come up with a solution fast to get it fixed.
While it wasn't enough to win, LSU quarterback Jayden Daniels had another eye-popping performance. The senior had 301 total yards and 3 TDs at halftime. For the game, he led both teams in passing and rushing, racking up 163 yards on the ground.
He's an amazing man, Heisman candidate, of course. I mean, that's why he's there. I mean, he just kept rallying and putting the team on his back whenever we needed him.
He was good. He was good. He was really good. And he's tough. The runs that he had tonight were outstanding runs that kept drives alive. I mean, if he's not out there, we're not even in the game.
Daniels' day came to a scary halt in the fourth quarter when he was laid out on a helmet-to-helmet hit. He came out of the game, came back in for 1 play, and then was ultimately ruled out and placed in concussion protocol.
Tough hit. It's in the flow of the game. I don't think it was intentionally a late hit, but it's tough to see that in that situation, and to see him come out is a bummer.
LSU is now eliminated from SEC West contention, but can't afford to let go of the rope now with 3 games left to go. In Tuscaloosa, Seth Lewis, 4th down on 4.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. Now LSU has 3 more games, all at home, then a bowl game. It's Florida, then Georgia State, then Texas A&M. Now, Seth got some analysis after the game in Tuscaloosa.
All right, Wilson, let's start with the Alabama ground game. They rushed for over 300 yards in this contest. Why do you feel like the Tide were able to dominate so much on the ground?
It started with Jalen Milroe and the dual threat ability that he has. Jalen Milroe had not rushed like he did in this game all season. His season high was 69 yards rushing. He goes for 155 on the ground and 4 touchdowns. First time an Alabama quarterback has ever done that in a single game. LSU could not wrap him up. Whatever they were trying to do defensively was not effective whatsoever. It particularly hurt them on third down. Alabama, I think, was 11 of 14 on third down. Jalen Milroe was extending plays and thus extending drives, just scrambling in a lot of ways. It didn't look like a lot of designed runs. It was just scrambles that LSU was not ready for it anyway. The eye discipline wasn't there. Tackling wasn't consistently there enough, and that's really where it started for Alabama offensively.
You mentioned third down, and Milroe was really dangerous on that down. I noticed in the game, I think he had at least 6 plays of over 10 yards on third down. How much of a backbreaker was that for LSU? And then Coach Kelly mentioned about communication issues. Did you see that as well, as far as guys just not in the right places, especially on third down?
Well, certainly on third down, absolutely, and there was an absolute backbreaker. I mean, LSU in the games in which his defense has struggled the most has really struggled on third down. Ole Miss was rough on third down. Arkansas was rough on third down. It had gotten better, but it had been playing some one-dimensional offenses, and Alabama was not that way tonight, especially because of what Jalen was doing. Communication could have been an issue. Greg Penn was also saying that it was a matter of fatigue in the second half and guys just sort of losing their eyes. Then, because of them getting fatigued, all of those sort of technical things that have to be, sharp, just were getting really loose, and they were out of position in a lot of ways and faded away in the second half while Alabama continued to pick up steam.
Now, Jayden Daniels had a really good contest, and obviously LSU had 28 points. But do you feel like it's just maybe a little bit too much pressure on the LSU offense to almost have to be perfect when the defense makes so many mistakes in big games like this?
And that's why this was kind of a concern, because this was a solid Alabama defense. Not just solid, a good Alabama defense. The best that LSU had played by pretty much every metric this season. And so when you had that strength versus strength, you were probably going to lose a couple of times. And that was what obviously hurt in the end of this game, because Jayden threw that interception when it was 35-28, and then Alabama turned around and scored, and that was obviously the difference. He had to be perfect. The whole offense had to be perfect. And it's just hard to do that in any sort of circumstance, especially on the road against a top 10 team.
Now, you mentioned that LSU now has 3 losses. They're out of the race for the SEC West. So what do you feel like is left for LSU? Like, what is the goal with 3 games left to go?
Well, the goal is to win those 3 games in the regular season. Finish 9-3, get to a bowl game, and maybe win your 10th game there. It's not what LSU wanted to do this season. This was a team that really believed it could compete for a national championship. It has an offense that is capable of doing that, especially when it's playing at its best. But you got to be able to recalibrate and not let the season completely spiral out of control. It's going to take those leaders in the locker room keeping everybody together when it does feel like what you really wanted to do is no longer attainable.
And our thanks to Wilson Alexander and Seth. Great job in Tuscaloosa. Now, on the road at East Carolina, Tulane got just enough offense. This Michael Pratt to Lawrence Keys touchdown. They got a fourth-quarter field goal that broke a 10-10 tie. But the difference in this game, a suffocating Green Wave defense that allowed East Carolina nothing in the second half.
Started getting more pressure on the quarterback. Good job of keeping him in the pocket. Good job of rush lanes. Good tight coverage in the secondary. There's probably 7, 8, 9 guys that had really nice plays. So just a great overall defensive effort.
We know every game is going to be a battle. We're going to get every team's best. We know we're going to get their best. We know this was a really good team. So we're going to expect that every week. Next week, we're going to go to Tulsa and expect the same thing and attempt to go 1-0 again.
Or else he wouldn't be doing it. But
yes, Tulsa is next. Green Wave now 8-1 on the season. To the Southland Conference, and maybe the single biggest win of the Tim Rebowe era at Nicholls State. On the road at Incarnate Word, who was ranked 4th in the country, and the Colonels ran all over them. Former John Curtis Patriot Colin Guggenheim rushed for 153 yards and 4 touchdowns. Nicholls as a team rushed for 331 yards, and they win it 45-32. If the Colonels can win their last 2 against Lamar and Southeastern, they would win the Southland Conference and get the automatic berth into the NCAA tournament. And Southeastern got win number 2 on the season, beating McNeese State at home 38-24. Rodeo Graham had 3 rushing touchdowns. The Lions are now 2-7 on the season. Now, the high school football regular season is over. The playoff seedings are out. We have 2 number 1 seeds in the Channel 4 viewing area. One of them we expected, one of them we didn't. We'll break down the brackets. That's ahead on 4th Down on 4. Prep football playoffs begin this weekend. Louisiana will hand out 8 state championships. We have 15 local schools seeded in the top 5 of their class, but we only have 2 number 1 seeds. The first in the Division I side of the select side, the Holy Cross Tigers. They used this win over John Curtis to grab that number 1 seed. I know they have bigger goals, but this is quite an accomplishment. Congratulations to Coach Scott Watney and the Tigers. Huge accomplishment at Holy Cross. Now, Brother Martin seeded 4th in Division I. Edna Carr dropped to a really dangerous 5 seed after a loss Friday night to John Curtis. Now, you probably heard the controversy around that John Curtis Carr game. We thought J.T. Curtis was going for the all-time American record for high school coaching wins until this week, when the LHSAA clarified how many games Curtis had forfeited a decade ago. Honestly, that's what really stinks about this story. We didn't know how many games were forfeited off of J.T. Curtis's record until this past week. The LHSAA's job is to govern Louisiana prep sports, not to keep their rulings a secret. J.T. Curtis did not break the record Friday night, but he did win his 622nd game as John Curtis's head coach.
Back to 1970, man. It was 69 and we didn't win one. But a lot of those guys were on that team. We're part of that 70 win. And every win allowed us to get to this position and this point. And that makes me very, very proud and makes me very humble to think how many guys contributed to this.
And they are a dangerous 6 seed. Now, I spent my Friday night in Laplace watching the St. Charles Catholic Comets overpower the Newman Greenies. The Comets are 2-time defending state champions, and they look good Friday night. They are our other number 1 seed. Select Division II, Edie White seeded number 2. John F. Kennedy, alma mater of the great Roe Brown, seeded 4. Archbishop Shaw 5. Division 3, the Comets are number 1. Newman is seeded 3rd. In Division 4, St. Martin's is number 4. Riverside 5. And I know it's done by computer, so you can't really blame voters. But get this, the Destrehan Wildcats are the defending state champions, and they're undefeated this season. Yet somehow they're seeded third in Division I of the traditional public school bracket side called non-select. The Wildcats are the number 3 seed in Division I. Lutcher is number 4 in Division II. And then in Division III, St. James is seeded third, Bogalusa 5th. And in Division IV, Kentwood is seeded second. Don't forget, 4th Down Friday night, 10:15 here on Channel 4. We're back with more 4th Down on 4 in a minute. TJ McCollum is now out with a collapsed lung. The Pelicans play again Monday night in Denver. We're out of time. Thanks for watching.